Discover Your Talent, Do What You Love. I'm your host, Don Hutcheson. Every Tuesday, I interview someone from around the world who's discovered their talents to do work they love to create a life of success, satisfaction, and freedom. On Fridays, I interview an individual with many years of experience from one of the most popular or interesting occupations or professions who shares an insider's look at what it's really like to do what they do. Today, I'm delighted to bring you our featured guest, Aurora Winter. Welcome, Aurora.
I'm so glad to be here with you, Don.
It is our pleasure. Aurora, are you using your talents doing work that you love?
Absolutely, at least 80% of the time. Gotta
All
confess.
right. Well, I like the 80-20 rule, so I hear you, and you just turned it upside down. Aurora Winter is a best-selling author, TV producer, media coach, ghostwriter, and successful serial entrepreneur. She uses her filmmaking expertise and neuroscience training to help people communicate and get results, whether it's raising 7 figures for a startup, negotiating for a raise, or enrolling a new client. If you've ever wanted to write a book, become an in-demand speaker, or communicate more effectively, Aurora has the expertise and insights to help you achieve your goals. An amazing story, Aurora. We look forward to digging deeper. As we've discussed in pre-interview chats, everyone's life is about turning points or passages from the day we're born till we leave this plane of existence. So please take us into the backstory of Aurora Winter, where it all began, family of origin, and tell us about the people and choices and changes that have gotten you where you are today.
I love how you dig into people's turning points, and that is a key element for everyone to be aware of in their stories, and that's what I like to help people do as well. So my family of origin, my father is a professor and an economist, and my mother is a genius and a geneticist. So around the dinner table, we would have the blackboard, the dictionary, and the thesaurus. This is back in the day of the dictionary and the thesaurus being bricks rather than on your iPhone.
Now, wait a minute. This is the first time in 984 interviews over 6 years that anybody's ever said this, and I can't tell you how jealous I am of that. I cannot tell you. That's who I am, and I had a great family. But I mean, that is like a dreamed idea for me. So you literally had those discussions at dinner. Wow.
Absolutely. So my father and mother really taught me, to be quick with your ideas, and we practiced coming up with $1 million business ideas. So I built a lot of myelin on that. So yeah, yes. and made it really fun. But we were always learning, hence the blackboard at the table. Not too many families had that.
No, I don't know any that had it. So he was a professor of economics. And where did you say you were born?
I was actually born in Ames, Iowa, when my parents were studying at Iowa State University. My father got his PhD. He likes to call it his piled higher and deeper. So his PhD in agricultural economics, and my mother was studying genetics. So I happen to be the only one in my family who was born in the States, so I have a dual citizenship. I'm in Canada right now.
Okay. And he was in economics, and she was as a geneticist. How fascinating!
Yeah, very fascinating. Well, my mother's father, my grandfather, was one of the key influences in my life, and I've got an interesting story about him if you'd like to know. But
yes, tell us.
Yeah. He was the second son, and when his mother died, this was back in England, when his mother died, his father remarried a much younger woman, so that's fine so far, except then his father died died from falling out of the hayloft, which left his older brother and this not very farm savvy young woman who wasn't his mother running the farm. So he realized, as the second son, there was no future in this. He had studied agriculture, and he took his big farm almanac, which is the Bible of farming, and he got in a boat and he came to Canada with basically no money, but he had the farm almanac. And then he got in a big long line of people who were looking for jobs. Everybody was seeking work at that time. He was born in the 1900s, so these were not very flush times. And the guy who was interviewing the long line of people for jobs noticed that he was wearing a certain kind of ring and said, "Oh, just stand to one side there, Harry Lawton, and I will find time for you at the end." So my grandpa, Harry Lawton, waited. And he was offered the job as the farm manager at an Indian reserve. So he took that job.
Wait a minute. I missed the point of the ring.
He was a Freemason, but the point of the story was that it was very hard times, and people would let their horses loose over the winter just to let them loose to graze so they wouldn't have to buy hay for them because people had no money. Oh. And the semi-wild horses would get rounded up, and then people would have to pay $1, to pay for the free range to reclaim their horses. But a lot of people couldn't reclaim their horses. So my grandpa, who must have been 24 or something like that at the time, thought to himself, I see, this is a problem, which might be also an opportunity. So he put together all of his wages and he bought about 20 horses. And then he drove those horses for about 400, 500 miles to get them to where his homestead was going to be in northern Alberta, around the Knighton area, which is near Edmonton, Alberta. And this was a brilliant brain stroke because what happened was nobody had any money, but everybody would trade for a horse. So he traded those 20 horses for cattle, for a plow, for equipment, for help building his house, and then he only kept a couple of horses to pull the plow. So my grandfather's demonstrated by taking the risk of coming to Canada and taking the risk of using all of his money to buy these horses, but having the courage to see an opportunity and the willingness to drive these horses hundreds of miles, he actually went from a homesteader back in the 1900s. You could just, claim land, but you had to live on it for 6 months of a year. You had to build property. You had to take down the trees. So he had fulfillment to require, but he went from that with basically nothing to thousands of acres and thousands of head of cattle, and one of the most influential farmers in the time in Knighton, Alberta. He helped found the school and supporting the Rotary Club and all community activities. Anyway, so...
Well, you said your mother's a genius. Well, she got it honestly, because I can't imagine 1 out of a million people would have had the vision to see what he saw.
I know,
and to do
right?
what he did. No.
Yeah.
I mean, that's genius. He went from having this little homestead to building a whole ranch and a whole big enterprise.
Well, if you keep making clever decisions, even if they're only slightly more clever than your neighbors, eventually over time it accumulates, the exponential growth. So yes, eventually his sons, and their sons, and I guess some daughters as well, made this grow into a huge feedlot. I think it's got about 6,000 or 7,000 cattle now and about 7,000 acres in Alberta. So they're very successful farmers. So there you go. Start small. But who knows where it can end up if you do what you love. And if you have the Farmer's Almanac. Like my grandfather really loved farming. He had expertise. He had the Farmer's Almanac. He studied farming. And he loved making things grow.
Okay, so what were you like as a young woman growing up? What were you into with these amazing parents and grandparents?
I was an optimistic bubble of enthusiasm.
Okay.
I loved tagging along with my big brother, who's also a genius. He's now a quantum physicist. I loved farming, actually. I loved the smell of the soil. I had horses. I loved riding horses. And if I wasn't, riding my horse or tagging along on the farm, I was reading. I had my nose in a book. But it was a nice balance between farming and reading.
Yeah. And then when you got into school, what topics or areas of study did you like?
Well, in high school, I loved English. And I remember my professor or teacher in high school, his name was Bill Pickett. And he loved Shakespeare. He loved English. He studied it. He presented it so brilliantly. I remember falling in love with Shakespearean language and being so excited. And he took the high school kids to the Shakespearean Festival fairly nearby. And that was like, wow, so exciting. Blew my mind. So he added fuel to the fire of my enthusiasm about language. So that was really cool. But he also taught me something else, which is when I get really excited, or in high school when I got really excited, and I'd studied the books inside and out. He'd ask a question. I know the answer, like super excited. And I would always have the answer. I was so happy to share it. And one day at the end of class, everybody's trailing out. And he's like, Aurora, could you stay for just a second? I'm like, oh, sure. What's up, Mr. Pickett? And he said, I know you know the answer, but maybe you could let other people answer sometime. I'm like, oh, okay. I got to balance my enthusiasm with allowing other people the opportunity to be heard. Yeah. Okay. Good idea. So that was another thing that he taught me.
Yes. Well, how did you, with all this amazing background and influences, how did you make a decision about college and university?
Well, that was pretty easy. As I said, my father was working at the University of British Columbia at the time. He was the chairman of the Department of Agricultural Economics. So naturally, I studied economics. And of course, I studied English because those were my two loves. And when it came time to choose my major, I wanted to choose English. And my father told me, don't be ridiculous. Nobody can make money as a writer. Why don't you take a minor in English and major in economics? So I did that. I studied honors economics, and I was pretty good at it. But I did have, all those years at the dinner table to give me a head start.
Oh, I can't imagine what advantage that gave you. My word, you knew every aspect of it. 50,000 feet in ground zero, right?
Yeah, exactly. I had a bit of a head start. So actually, that's how I met the man who became my husband. Because he realized, it would be good to have some smart study buddies. And I was, once again, answering all the questions in the econ class. I guess my English professor's lesson was not fully embodied. So, yeah. So
he was in an econ class with you? He was.
He was.
Well, did you have internships or anything going through BC? Do you call it BC for British Columbia?
UBC. I did. I worked as, what do they call it, an intern in the farm economics branch. So I was studying, the impact of, forestry in Southeast Asia or whatever it was. So that was interesting. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, good. All right. Well, what's the first step you took after UBC?
I got a job for working for Urbanics, which was in downtown Vancouver. I worked in an office tower, which was way cool for a girl who grew up on a farm. All those shiny surfaces, I must have made it. And I did market feasibility studies, which meant to determine where to put shopping centers or townhouse or single family dwellings. So some of it was just calculating population growth and seeing where the shopping centers and townhouses already were. And sometimes it actually involved going out to the shopping center and measuring it by pacing it. I'm sure they would do it much more accurately with Google Maps these days. So that was kind of a fun job, and I worked in the library, although it was a very small library. But me and books, I loved being in the library. Yeah. And I was quite good at my job. What I learned was to double check everything because you must be perfect if you're going to be paid for what you did. And I was so young. I really just wanted to impress my boss with my brilliance, meticulous work, and my loyalty.
I'll tell you, if I had, there's several principles I would say to students, but, on different fronts. But as far as that ethos of double checking everything, I could not agree more. Oh. I could not agree more because truly, it's, it's now more than ever. There's so much sloppiness in language and even articles by top journals and everything. You just wonder, what are they thinking?
I still double check everything. And
me too.
Maybe it's a kind of a compulsion. Or even if I do it on Excel spreadsheet, like I'll do another calculation to make a check, like a check and balance, because you just can't be wrong. And it's pretty easy to be off by a factor of 10 or to, add up something incorrectly if you're using a calculator or whatever. And you don't want that.
Are you the same with vocabulary?
Double checking vocabulary. In what sense?
I love language. As Sam Irvin said, I love the English language as my mother tongue. And what I've been interested in over the last, less than decade, is the disillusion of the English language, both in the spoken word and in the written word.
There's so much power in the written and spoken word to communicate ideas, to discover what you really think, to inspire others, to launch a movement. But to answer your question, I think I am still basically the same. I remember when in my 20s, I've always been studying writing, and I was reading Stephen King, and I underline, word choices that I like. And he wrote A Bruised Sky. And I'm like, oh, wow, what an efficient way to communicate, that purpley black sky and to create this ominous sense of foreboding. So I wrote that down, Bruised Sky. And then last night I was reading Brandon Sanderson's book, Oathbringer. And again, he used a really nice phrase, and I wrote that down because I'm like, oh, I love the unusual word choice. Put that together. But it could be ordinary words like bruised sky. Those are two ordinary words, but put together that way, it makes it fresh. So.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's utterly original. I actually keep I know this is really geeky, but I've never said this on air, but I really keep these big notebooks of vocabulary just because, well, I do, because alphabetically. And there was a quote in one of these papers that said, the power of words. Words can inspire, words can destroy. Choose yours well.
I like to say words are blessings or curses.
Well, yeah. Nietzsche said, all I need is a sheet of paper and something to write with, and then I can turn the world upside down.
You and I are on the same page. Nietzsche said a bunch of really amazing things.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, where did you go after urbanics?
Well, what I learned working at Urbanics is that I'm not cut out to be an employee.
Okay. All right.
I can be kind of an impatient person, and so that is both a blessing and a curse. But I did also learn how to do market feasibility studies, and my then boyfriend, who later became my husband, David, was working as a salesperson at Xerox. You may recall they had a fantastic program training young people to be good at sales. And he was also a good sailor. He'd sailed his whole life. I, on the other hand, was afraid of water. And I sucked at sales because I'm from an academic family. We are reserved and more academic. But I knew how to do a market feasibility study. And the main question was, what business can you start with no money? Well,
right.
If you have money, you have to at least leverage some talents. So I leveraged my ability to do a market feasibility study with my husband-to-be's abilities as a sailor and a salesman. And we started a yacht rental business, a yacht charter business on Vancouver Island.
Because
Yeah, I know, because the only business we could start with no money involved, helping other people get their boat that they owned rented out. So other people owned the boat, other people paid all their expenses for the boat, but we provided the service of, hey, would you like to rent your boat out? And we took a 30% fee for doing that. So it was win-win, and it required no capital. But still, it was touch and go that first year. We ate rice and beans and more rice and beans, and still lived in a 400 square foot place because all of our money went into our business. But in the end, that company and another one we started became the largest yacht dealer and yacht charter company in Western Canada, a multi-million-dollar company. Following after my grandfather's footsteps.
Yes, yeah. Well, what a great idea. Were there that many? There must have been on this Vancouver Island. There must have been many boats to make that lucrative, huh?
Well, here's the thing that's a good tip for your audience, Don, is when you've discovered the things that you love to do and your talents, see how you can add something extra. How can you create more value? This is a question I love to ask myself and ask my clients. How can you create more value? So at the time, I noticed that there were tax shelter benefits for rental property, like townhouses or houses. If you rented them out, there were tax benefits. And I asked the $1 million question, which was, I wonder if we could do this with boats. And the answer turned out to be yes, after we spent $20,000 with lawyers and accountants figuring it out. So we were the only company in Western Canada who offered to sell you a brand new boat, completely equip it for rental, and then take care of renting it and managing the rentals for you, leaving you with five.
Can you hold on just one second? Wait, somebody just hold on a second. Okay, I apologize. So go ahead. You.
No problem.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to do this. Then you can easily find where to fix it.
Okay.
So basically, what do you love to do? And who is that worth the most to are good questions. And then how can you add more value? So how we added more value was by adding tax shelter benefits to the purchase of a new boat. And we also added value by taking care of renting the boat and managing the charters for the people. So people who already wanted to own a boat could do so in the most tax advantaged way, and it would cost them a fraction of what it normally would. But even though this was a brilliant idea, and I had like 144 pages of tax bulletins to prove it,
wow,
the business didn't really take off until I came up with $1 million message. So this was the first time that I learned how important it was to communicate clearly and concisely. So instead of overwhelming people who wanted a boat with all of the details about the tax shelter and all of the details about the charter business, the line I finally came up with was 5 weeks of sun, fun, and tax shelter.
Oh,
and along with a picture of people having fun sailing, the phone rang off the hook. People had to understand, what am I talking about? 5 weeks of sun, fun, and tax shelter. And so then I had the opportunity to explain the boat is 10% personal use. So you can use it 10% of the time to take your holidays. And by renting it out the rest of the time, we can legitimately claim those as business expenses. And you have a realistic expectation of profit because here we've got, the rental income from other boats in the past. And don't worry about all the details because we take care of it for you. So
Beautiful. Beautiful.
That was a solution.
That is $1 million idea. How long had you and your husband had the business? What did you call the business when you started on Vancouver Island?
We called it Pacific Quest Charters, and then Pacific Quest Yacht Sales was the yacht sales company.
Okay. And then how long had you been around until you came up with the big idea, the 5 ways of sun, fun, and tax shelter?
I think it was maybe a year.
Uh-huh. Good.
My mind is always restlessly looking for more ideas.
Sure. Okay, good.
And this is another tip for other people is like, where can you put two things that don't normally seem to go together? So, tax benefits and boats don't really seem necessarily to go together. But if you lean into that, maybe there's some opportunities or whatever two things you notice are working in different industries. If you can combine them, that can really add a lot of value. And if you can add more value, then your company will grow.
Exactly. So what was the next segue? How long did you keep running Pacific Quest Charter and Yacht Sales?
Well, we kept running it. Basically, the short story is, so as not to make the story too detailed, we kept running it until my husband died. So he died when he was 33 and I was 31. And we had a 4-year-old son. So that was not expected. I was completely blindsided by his death. And I went from, rather cozy life as a wife and a business partner and a part-time writer with a beautiful 4-year-old kid who's adorable as only 4-year-olds are, to all of a sudden being a single mother, a widow. Ugh, I hated that word. Yes. And zero income. I'm like, okay, this is a problem I need to solve somehow. And that led to my second time where I learned through experience the value of a short, snappy message. So I ended up being invited to pitch a television movie that I was writing at the Banff Television Festival. It's now called the Banff Media Festival. And I would do so in front of like 600 of the movers and shakers in Hollywood and in Canada and around the world. And just in case people didn't miss it, it was going to be televised. So at first I thought, okay, fantastic. I'm a nobody. Nobody knows me. I have nowhere to go but up. Starting so low, nowhere to go but up. And but then later, just before pitching, my neck went into spasm, my shoulder was kinked. I'm like, because I realized, on the other hand, if I blow it, I can just ruin my reputation in 20 minutes in one fell swoop. But I practiced what I preached. So I had practiced my pitch, practiced what I wanted to say. And I was lucky because my agent was there, in case anything good happened. She was ready to field offers on my behalf.
Yes.
And what happened is that 20-minute pitch actually did spark a bidding war. And I had producers from Spelling Television and from various Canadian producers, saying, what did I want and how could they acquire the movie rights?
What was the concept? Can you share the concept with us?
Well, it's always good to talk about something that you deeply care about. So I had written a screenplay called Lost Rituals, and it was about absent fathers and lost sons, obviously. Right. My husband was quite absent as he was on the other side of the veil. Right. This was a topic near and dear to my heart. But as I researched it, I realized that absent fathers is a big problem in many different communities and places, and shows up like boys attempting to initiate themselves into manhood. In fact, it's still something I believe we're really missing in our society is initiation processes that would help young boys become men. So many cultures have initiation processes. I mean, the Jewish culture does still have bar mitzvah. African tribes would, scare the bejesus out of their kids when they absconded with them wearing masks. In our society, we have lost most of the rituals of helping initiate young boys. Anyway, so
no, it's okay. That's what the movie was about. That's what the movie was about.
That's what the movie was about, and it was called Lost Rituals.
Wow.
So people like that. And it ended up eventually, being optioned, but also ended up making me at least a little bit, for a moment, my 15 minutes of fame in the film and television business in Canada. And it led indirectly to me getting offered the job as head of development for Canada's largest film and television production company, which was called Atlantis Films at the time. So I went from no jobs, no reputation, and no prospects, no husband, no business, and no boats, but a son, to all of a sudden having a really plum job as a head of development for a company that I loved, for a boss that I loved, Seton McLean, who was another mentor, and I was indirectly responsible for 250 hours of film and television production and a development budget of over $1 million for scripts. So I was totally doing what I loved. I was in my complete happy place, surrounded by creative people and working on film and television, movies and scripts, and going to parties at the Cannes Television Festival and NATPE and Banff, things like that.
Oh, my word. And this has happened after your dear husband passed, and there you were starting from ground zero, and you came up with the whole idea of Lost Rituals, and then they bid on that great idea, and then you started working for Atlantis Films, and that whole process how long did it take for all that to transpire before you got in with Atlantis Films? Was that months and months, or a couple of years, or what was it?
It was a few months. Like it wasn't like at the second of the pitch, but it was followed thereafter fairly shortly, and they offered it to me, which was really cool. And
very cool.
Yeah. And it just goes to show, like, when you show up and you've practiced what you want to say and you're really passionate about it, you might think that the best case scenario is your movie gets made, and you might think that the worst case scenario is that you embarrass yourself. But there's usually other things that happen. Right. There can be other good benefits. So just show up 100%, and you never know what will unfold. But you often ask about mentors and teachers, and one of the things that my husband taught me, well, he taught me a lot about many things, but one of the things my husband's death taught me was that I do, in spite of all appearances to the contrary, I live in a supportive universe. So I had been writing in my journal. I keep a journal. I've kept one since I was 9, and been writing in my journal, please God, show me a way to take care of my son and support myself. And then, these job opportunities show up. And even the way I got invited to present on for the province of British Columbia was a miraculous coincidence, which I think is God's hand. So that was, my husband's death was the worst thing that happened to me, but it did teach me that surprisingly, I don't have to have all the answers, and that there's something out there that is supportive. If I show up and do my best, things will work out.
How long did you stay with Atlantis Films?
I stayed with them for about a year because this personality trait of impatience and thinking I have a better idea is ongoing. So I met a man in Cannes at the Cannes Television Festival, I guess it was. He was in a similar kind of job for a different company, a British company, and we decided to start our own film and television production company.
Oh.
He was in a similar kind of job for a different company, a British company, and we decided to start our own film and television production company.
Oh.
So once again, I wrote a business plan. I got good at that, and I accessed some benefits such as Canadian content and European content and various tax shelter benefits that could come if you structured the business a certain way, and the EIN tax shelter scheme. And we ended up raising about $5 million for that company, and we went on to make 8 films. So, yeah, so that worked out.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Did the films do well?
The films did fine. There were a mix of different films, family movies, small budgets, not your $100 million blockbuster, but $1 or $2 or $3 million movies. Mm-hmm. And then that business partnership dissolved because I was in love with my business partner, and he wanted the business to be successful before we got married, and I thought that sequence was the wrong order. So I went back to being working at a job as a vice president of development for another film and television company called Porchlight Entertainment in Hollywood. All roads lead to Hollywood if you are in the film business, and if you
did you leave Canada? Did you leave Canada and move there?
I did.
Oh,
yeah. I've lived in Canada, in the United States since 1995.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, how did Hollywood go? That's an amazing place in so many ways.
Hollywood is let's do lunch, but they don't mean it. That's a whole different story. Right. Highs and lows and fascinating. I actually got to screen movies at Quentin Tarantino's private theater. Oh. Everybody else in the theater had already seen the movie Django Unchained, and Quentin was kind of looking over his shoulder at me because I was the only one who hadn't seen it because I wasn't on the film crew, and I'm very expressive, so I'm easy to scare. So I would jump, like every time I was shocked or surprised, or I'd go like that. So he liked that. That gave him a fresh audience. And then we went to the Oscars. My boyfriend at the time, Wiley Stateman, did the sound. In fact, he's done all the sound for all of Quentin's movies, including Django Unchained. So that was way cool. And I got to get gowns sent to me to wear to the Oscars. But the only thing is I'm only 5'2". So they very clearly, emphatically warned me, do not hem these gowns. Just, you have to sort of like just gently tack them up because they must have been made for Amazons who were like 6'2". There was a lot of, it was quite fun. I wore a beautiful red gown. So, I mean, all of these experiences really led to the fodder, for the book that I published just recently, Turn Words into Wealth, because it relates back to the story. You asked me, how did I choose what to study? And I told you I wanted to study writing, but my father said, nobody makes a living as a writer, do something sensible. So I studied economics instead. And now my book, Turn Words into Wealth, I hope it helps people go, actually, there are a bunch of ways to make money as an author or as a speaker or as a YouTuber. There are a number of different ways to monetize your message. So if you really want to be an author, just read my book or some other books and think about what are the best ways to do it. How can you add most value? And yes, it is true that it is quite difficult to make money just from royalties of a book. But on the other hand, there are many stories, and a lot of them are in that book, Turn Words into Wealth, Blueprint for Your Business, Brand, and Book, that show success stories from Tim Ferriss to my clients to Jeff Walker, who wrote the book Launch. If you use a book as part of your business plan, it can absolutely make a difference and make you money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, how did you segue there from all this amazing career you've had? When did you segue into just doing your own consulting?
I think I've had so many lifetimes. So my first book, From Heartbreak to Happiness, is my diary of healing, and it was endorsed by Dr. Wayne Dyer, and that was the first time that I discovered the value of a book. I mean, I'm a slow learner. I really only learn when I do it. And I'm like, oh, note to self. Notice what happened. So when I published my diary of healing, From Heartbreak to Happiness, I honestly thought it would only help other young widows whose husbands died suddenly, who happened to be their business partner, and they also happened to have like a 4-year-old son.
Right.
But I thought, you know what? I was in such agony after my husband died. If I could share my diary of healing, and if it would help one other person to suffer a little bit less, it is worth the effort of putting out this book. And C.S. Lewis is one of my writing mentors, and he wrote a book called A Grief Observed, which was turned into a movie, Shadowlands, starring Deborah Winger. Yes. And Anthony Hopkins. So I thought, there is a value in a diary because it helps people go, okay, well, this is what this playing field could look like. So I wrote that book and published it, From Heartbreak to Happiness. And that book ended up bringing so many people to me who were grieving and who wanted help that eventually I decided, well, I'd better help them then. So I launched a company called the Grief Coach Academy to train coaches and to support people through grief, because 50 million people are dealing with loss in the United States alone. And on average, they suffer 5 to 8 years. That is just wrong. It's insane. And partly we suffer 5 to 8 years because we don't have a process for learning how to grieve. We don't normalize grief. Everything is all sanitized. It's not like when my grandpa was on the farm, you wanted to have chicken for dinner. Well, go out, grab the chicken, lock it, and chop its head off, and then take the feathers off. Like that. That doesn't happen very much today. So, but by distancing ourselves from a normal part of life, which is death, we make the grieving process so much harder. Because we think, why me? Why did this happen to me? Well, you know what? It happens to everybody. You die, people you love die. And it was helpful to have a process. So I launched the Grief Coach Academy, trained a number of coaches. I believe I made a huge difference in that field, wrote several books about grieving. And then in 2014, more and more people kept asking me, how do you get on radio, Aurora? How do you get on TV? How did you write so many books? How on earth do you make this all go together in a business? And I thought, you know what? I would like to help people with their marketing and their business plans. I better get an MBA so that I'm sure that I know what I'm talking about, because I still had a little bit of maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm missing something in spite of my success. So I got my MBA. I took that in 2014, 2015.
Where'd you go? Where'd you take it?
I went to the University of Iowa. They have an outreach with Chimba, which is in Italy. So I spent most of the year in Italy, but the course was given in English, primarily from professors from the University of Iowa. So then I graduated in 2015 with an MBA, and then I had the same question once again. Okay, Aurora, what do you want to do now? And it's like your podcast is so helpful, Dawn. I was thinking, okay, well, what are my talents? What do I really love to do? What am I really good at? And who is that worth most to? And I realized I did karma math. They don't teach that at MBA, but karma math, my way of calculating it is if I help one person out of grief, I'm taking somebody out of the hole and putting them back in the sunshine. One person out of the hole, back in the sunshine. That's good. If I train a coach, then I train the coach how to do that, and then they take people out, and they maybe help dozens of people. But I thought, if I help people who are already helping people, who are already thought leaders or emerging thought leaders, or already have some life experience or business experience, or they have some expertise that could help others, and I help them to get the message out to thousands or hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people, then the karma math is better. So I want my life to make a difference. I want my life to make as big of a difference as possible. And so my mission right now is to be a catalyst, encouraging, inspiring prodding, evoking for hopefully millions of people to appreciate and understand that their story matters, their life experience matters, their business experience and expertise matters, and encourage them to spend some time clarifying their story so it's clear and compelling and concise, and then leverage it one-to-many, broadcast it one-to-many, which could look like a book, or it could look like a video, or it could look like a podcast. I like books, of course, that's my bias, but when you get your message down to something clear and concise, then you can broadcast it. Many of my clients have done TED Talks and reached, millions of people with the same message, but they practiced, they honed their message, they got it just so before doing their 20-minute TED Talk, and then
yes.
reaching millions. Mm-hmm.
Oh man, that is so wonderful. Well, just truly an amazing story. Just in a few sentences, what is your personal vision going forward, Aurora?
Well, I was just touching on it. My personal vision is really to inspire people to lean into the value of their story. I think that is the only thing we really have to give others that is from us is our story. So what I noticed is when I shared my story of how devastated I was when my husband died, and then how I gradually healed, that helped many, many people. They went, okay, I don't necessarily shoot myself just yet. This could turn out okay if I hang, right? And when I share stories of, saying yes to a scary invitation, like talking, on television to pitch a movie, and that changed my life. I hope that encourages others to go, well, I'm a little bit nervous to do a TEDx talk, but okay, or a little bit nervous to take on a big yes for speaking in front of people on a podcast like yours. But yes, I'll do it. So that's what I would like to do. I'd really like to be that catalyst. I pray for God to use me as a catalyst for others to step into their greatness.
Aurora Winter, what a great pleasure being with you today, and we appreciate you sharing the highlights of your amazing life journey. And I know listeners around the world have learned many, many lessons that will help them on theirs. So tell our listeners how they connect with you, how they find your books, etc.
Okay, doke. I'm going to do that. I'm going to leave everybody with a challenge that they can do for free by themselves. Okay. So you can get my book, Turn Words into Wealth, Blueprint for Your Business, Brand, and Book, wherever books are sold. You can visit me on my website, which is my name, aurorawinter.com, AuroraWinter.com. And you can say hi to me on LinkedIn is probably the easiest, which is LinkedIn/in/my name, Aurora Winter. And I'd like to leave you with a challenge. It is a 90-day challenge that is in my book, Turn Words into Wealth. And it's, if you are at a turning point in your life, you'll find this super helpful, but it's also helpful anytime that you'd like to operate at a more elite level, or you'd like to solve some problem in your life and business. So it's a 90-day challenge and it only takes a few minutes a day. So I invite you to write every day, journal every day. It doesn't really matter what you write, but just have a habit of writing every day in your journal. It's just for you. It's just private. It's not anything showy. Just share what you're thinking and what happened the day before. And then second thing, read every day. It could be as little as 5 minutes. It could just be one page, one inspiring poem. It could just be a little bit of whatever book interests you. And then once a week, reflect. So review what you've written each week and review your highlights from the book that you're reading, because it's so helpful if you listen to yourself. Like when I was editing my book, which my diary, which became the book From Heartbreak to Happiness, I realized so many times that I'd prayed for guidance or I'd prayed for a miracle, and 3 months later it showed up. But because I didn't review, I'd forgotten I'd prayed for it, and I failed to be appropriately grateful. So but this is something, this 90-day challenge, anybody can do it. I think it will transform your life and your business and your relationships. So I call it radical reading, radical writing, and radical reflecting. Just do it every day. Well, the reflecting you only have to do once a week. A few minutes that can change your life. What do you think about that, Don?
Oh, I've been journaling for not since as a young person like you, but I've been journaling for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. And it's very seminal, even if you spend literally 5 minutes every morning, which is what I do. And it's just, it's really, but I like the other steps you're talking about. And also, I'm an avid reader outside of my interest in the occupation I'm in. I get a topic and then really bore down on it, and I couldn't agree more. Well, listeners know you can also go to discoveryourtalentpodcast.com, click on podcast in the navigation bar, and there you'll find the show notes of this very fine interview. In closing, every one of us is born with unique talents and gifts. We don't learn them. We can't ignore them. They're just a part of who we are, our DNA. Whenever we discover them and use them in our lives and careers, we do not merely survive, we thrive in every way possible. So until next time, all my best, and whatever you do, have fun out there today. Hello, world. Welcome to Discover Your Talent, Do What You Love. I'm your host, Don Hutcheson. Every Tuesday, I interview someone from around the world who's discovered their talents to do work they love to create a life of success, satisfaction, and freedom. On Fridays, I interview an individual with many years of experience from one of the most popular or interesting occupations or professions who shares an insider's look at what it's really like to